This particular occasion went into Prince Andrew's bedroom and his apartments, and on his bed was, I now know was 72, I said about 50, but I maid confirmed it was 72 because she had to count them, 72 teddy bears on his bed. And then my inspector showed me a laminated card which is in the side drawer.
Today we are diving into one of the most embarrassing portrayals ever created of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. These accounts offer a look into the conduct of the former prince. His behaviour was so immature, crude, and honestly degrading that many people are now wondering how it was ever allowed. These are claims from reporters, high society insiders, and witnesses who say Andrew acted like an overgrown child who depended on humiliation, shock tactics, and small-minded cruelty to draw attention. They describe him as someone who used his royal status to embarrass women, intimidate guests, and make people feel they couldn't push back. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything. Grab a cup of tea. This one is quite a story. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, now 65, was stripped earlier this month of all remaining titles and ordered by King Charles to leave Royal Lodge.
New fallout overseas just days after Prince Andrew announced he'll stop using his royal titles.
Now he faces new allegations and investigations related to Jeffrey Epstein and Virginia Giuffre.
It all comes just one day before Giuffre's memoir detailing her time with Andrew is set to be released.
The mansion he has lived in without paying rent for more than 20 years. That decision came after years of scandal involving Jeffrey Epstein and the catastrophic Newsnight interview that destroyed whatever credibility he had left. But as this new reporting makes clear, Andrew's downfall didn't appear out of thin air. For decades, people who encountered him at private gatherings described conduct that was odd, intrusive, and often degrading. One aristocratic woman summarized it perfectly when she called him the most boorish man I have ever met. The stories you're about to hear show exactly why. Writer Craig Brown recalls a rather uncomfortable episode from when Andrew was just 17. At a house party with several young women, the next morning brought complaints that Andrew had stormed into their bedroom at around 2 a.m. He allegedly told them he couldn't sleep because there was a ghost in his room and asked if he could crawl into bed beside them. He was promptly thrown out.
I said, didn't you hold a party for, Ghislaine Maxwell? And he went, no. And I thought, oh my God, I've got this wrong. Because I had my notes and I checked and I'd done all the research and I was like, no, my research is crumbling. And then he looked up and he went, it was a straightforward shooting weekend.
Another journalist recalled Andrew wandering into a girl's bedroom and then into her ensuite bathroom while she was brushing her teeth. He then proceeded to lecture her on how she should be doing it. A teenage prince barging into your room to instruct you on dental hygiene is less endearing and more an entitled annoyance. Even at that age, personal boundaries simply did not exist for him. Andrew's behavior toward women appeared to follow the same pattern throughout adulthood. Witnesses say he often acted as if female guests were there solely for his entertainment. At one gathering, he told a woman that a plate of pâté smelled awful. When she leaned down to sniff it, he shoved her face directly into the dish. Party guests say he burst out laughing while she sat there covered in food. Another woman said she woke to the sound of silly laughter and found Andrew holding a fire extinguisher aimed at her face. She later discovered he had rushed into several other rooms to pull the same stunt. The joke, in his mind, was worth the embarrassment inflicted on his targets.
The headlines will not go away, and neither will the questions for the palace. But could one of the king's most senior aides have some of the answers? This here is Lord Peter Roslin. Now, he is one of the most trusted members of the king's house.
These are not harmless pranks between equals. These are power plays carried out by someone who knew the people around him were in no position to complain. There is also a long-circulated claim that Andrew enjoyed what they discreetly referred to as his surprise inspections. Several guests say he roamed the hallways during overnight country house stays, pushing open any door where a light was still on. One socialite said he once opened her door, looked her up and down, and told her he was shopping for entertainment. She described the grin on his face as something that made her skin crawl. Another guest said Andrew would sometimes linger outside just to listen before bursting in with exaggerated laughter, as if he had caught someone in the act. The effect was unsettling. Many young women said they never felt they could relax for even a moment because the Queen's son might decide to make them the centerpiece of his next so-called joke.
Saying that, for the sake of the country and the monarchy, I'm going now. Well, he should have done that a long time ago. They should have pushed him out. It's happening now because there's been an increasing amount of publicity coming out. Almost every day there's some scandal about Andrew. We've had a couple of stories of leaked emails, which I think have come from Ghislaine.
Andrew developed an odd collection of games, many of which were created specifically to embarrass people. He liked to form choo-choo trains, where he would coax guests into a conga line while yelling choo-choo around the room. He also loved a fruit passing game where guests had to hold pieces of fruit between their chin and neck and pass them along without using their hands. Many women said it forced awkward closeness and felt uncomfortably suggestive. Another favorite was the mustard prank. Andrew would tell guests to shut their eyes, hold out their hands, and make a wish before clapping. What they didn't know was that he had placed an open tube of mustard between their palms. When they clapped, the mustard exploded all over their faces. Witnesses said this gave him tremendous amusement. These antics were not smart or witty. They were childish tricks, usually done to people who didn't dare push back. In 1981, the Queen rewarded Andrew for earning his helicopter wings by giving him a trip to Egypt.
Suggests that he is still a key part of the firm, despite being forced to step back in 2019 due to his associations with Jeffrey Epstein. Although Andrew has strenuously denied any wrongdoing, he has been ostracised from various family events.
President Anwar el-Sadat even lent him the presidential jet. It was supposed to be an elegant goodwill visit. Instead, Andrew spent most of the trip focusing far too closely on another guest's wife. This did not go unnoticed. The British ambassador later hosted a party for him attended by members of Egypt's elite. According to one rumor, Andrew jumped into the swimming pool fully dressed and pulled a hostess in with him. She reportedly came out soaked, miserable, and embarrassed while Andrew thought the entire incident was hilarious. This was not a rebellious teenager on a gap-year adventure. This was a royal on an official trip representing the crown. Although women were often his main targets, Andrew did not limit his antics to them alone. During the grand opening of the Lincolnshire Regiment's Museum, Major General Dick Gerard Wright struggled to manage his speech papers while wearing white gloves. As he slowly removed them, Andrew jumped from his seat, grabbed the gloves, and yelled, "You won't be needing these now, Dick," before tossing them into the crowd.
Here we have a large inhale right into the chest.
We now know that he was and had been procuring young girls for sex trafficking.
We now know that.
There's a postural shift. There's digital flexion, which just means the fingers are squeezing in towards the hand.
People were not entertained. They simply didn't know how to respond when a royal acted like a misbehaving schoolboy. One of the most notorious allegations involves broadcaster Tanya Breyer. In 1992, Andrew was said to have walked up behind her at a society function and unzipped her dress. This was done publicly, without her consent, and purely for the amusement of those nearby. Another aristocratic woman described a dinner at Windsor Castle where Andrew asked an 18-year-old what she did for work. When she said she was a secretary, he laughed loudly and announced to the entire table, "How terribly boring. Is that the best you could come up with?" Friends said he was awful to sit next to at dinners because his jokes were crude, bathroom-related, and often centered on women's underwear. Hardly the behavior expected from the son of a monarch. Andrew Lai said the king's brother has a strongly juvenile personality and often acted like this just to provoke reactions. But these were not harmless pranks. They were humiliations delivered from a place of enormous privilege. Many of his targets were young women and staff members who could not respond without risking their positions. For decades, the monarchy shielded him, excused him, or brushed off complaints. And as time passed, Andrew grew bolder, more vulgar, and more convinced he could act however he wanted. That illusion has now ended. On the 6th of November, King Charles stripped him of all remaining titles and privileges. This came shortly after the release of Virginia Giuffre's autobiography and a growing belief that the public would never accept Andrew returning to any royal role. These new accounts make it clear that the Andrew we see today is not a recent creation. The warning signs were always there. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is no longer styled as His Royal Highness and no longer holds a title. Soon, He will not even reside at Royal Lodge. But these stories expose a deeper truth. For decades, Andrew acted in ways that demeaned, belittled, and humiliated others, often women, because he believed he would never face consequences. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read every single one. Should more witnesses come forward? Should the palace have stepped in sooner? And what does this reveal about the culture that enabled it for so long? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more royal updates released daily.